Hello, hello, everyone. This is the first late night version of Airtime webinars. I'm extremely happy to greet my guest, Meltem. We're going to refer to her as Mel in our discussion today. So I see all of you tuning in already. If you have a second to share where you're tuning in from, and if you have like a good visual and audio of us, I really appreciate that. I know it's at least for the European listeners and anyone east from here, it's getting quite late. For the other ones, it's the middle of the day in the Americas. Now, a couple of things before we jump in the topic of talking about leveling up communication skills with Mel. So a few things. My name is Akush. I'm your host all the time in Airtime webinars. Airtime is an autonomous discovery platform which turns user calls into product insights in 2 clicks. You can run user research, sales, or customer service calls through it, and Airtime will automatically detect dominant feedback patterns for you in a few seconds. So today, my guest is Mel, and I just love the topic that we picked, which is about communication skills for researchers. It's the first time I touch on this topic with any guest at Airtime, so this is a big moment. And Mel, what you need to know about Mel is that she's a UX career coach and an ex-Glovo Staff manager UX researcher. She has over 10 years of research experience. And I think particularly for the session today, the additional knowledge that she brings also comes from the fact that she has been running courses on how to improve written communication skills for tech professionals. So I expect a lot of wisdom and a lot of practical tricks from her. A few things. Oh wow! I just looked at the chat here. I think we have a decent global coverage here. Amazing.
Yes, Josh, I love it. I'm almost in tears. I see Cleveland, Brazil, Netherlands, Nairobi, Uruguay, Pakistan, Greece, Germany, LA. I'm so happy. I'm in the moon. It's just amazing.
I mean, I have to tell you, I have to tell you, it's for you, like, and it's for the topic, and not to raise the the pressure too high for you. So, all right. So a few technicalities. If you have any questions about what me and Mel are discussing in the first 30 minutes of the webinar, please put your questions in the comments. I promise they won't be forgotten. If I have a chance, I'll put them on the screen already during the first 30 minutes, during which I'll have a live and vivid chat with Mel. But worst case, we'll cover them in the Q&A section. Secondly, I'll also put Mel's LinkedIn and my LinkedIn as well in the chat in a few seconds. This is probably the best way to get in touch with either of us in case you want to have any follow-up questions, you want to connect after the show and discuss anything with us. Last but not least, also from my side with the hat as a CEO of Airtime, I want to honor that you take the time and you're sitting here and listening to this webinar. And I want to give you a little special offer with 25% off for 3 months for Airtime. I'll put a secret promo code also in the chat in a few seconds. I think I said everything that I wanted. I even went over the allotted 2 minutes that I gave for myself. So we have to be extra efficient from this point on, Mel. And without further ado, let's shift to the main part of our conversation. It's a pleasure to have you here. And as a first step, I'd love to hear a few words about who you are, what you do, and what's your experience with research.
I love it. Thank you for having me, Akosh. It's really amazing to be your guest. I love, once again, every single person who's now participating from Detroit to Houston, everywhere. It's just so beautiful to be in this cozy environment. Well, I'm Mel. I'm based in Barcelona. I have 2 little children. They're aged 2 and 4. So if there's any mommies and daddies that are out there, I'm with you. Everything to do with the balancing work and life. I am, like Akosh just said, a UX career coach. I'm bringing a decade of experience in UX research, both in consultancy setup as well as in in-house tech environments. I was looking forward to connect with the people around here on LinkedIn so they can, have a closer look. But the whole point of what I'm doing here is to bring in what I've learned from UX research in career coaching so that we can treat your career as a product that we really care about, that we make the best of it, that is optimized, that is efficient, that gives you meaning and beauty and all those things. And a little more personal, I love biking. I saw some people from the Netherlands here. I used to live in the Netherlands before moving to Barcelona. So I have my Brompton. It's less than 10 kilos. I take it everywhere with me. So if there's any Brompton lover or someone that loves biking in general, I want to also hear about that because it's cool to talk about that as well.
Amazing. Thanks so much. It's not that it's a competition. I have also 2 kids, and they are 2 and 5. So very.
No, not competition. No.
All right. Mel, the topic for today and the theme of today is communication, and in particular, how UX researcher can become better at that. And I think that like a good starting point for the entire session could be to chat a little bit about why do you think it's important to focus on communication, and don't insights like speak for themselves? Like they're really powerful. What's your experience, like your own experience at Glovo and other places with that?
Amazing. Sure. What I'm about to say, Akosh, and everyone in our community here tonight or today, whenever you're listening to this, is based on my own experience as well as the experience of multitudes of people I worked with or I coached, I mentored over the years. The very short answer, my friends, is no. The insights do not. They do not speak for themselves. It's easy to forget one thing. I'm assuming that most people who are joining us tonight or today, whatever is your time zone, is really deeply interested in the methodology of their research, the research questions themselves. They love to go and find out something about the human nature and connect that to the product needs. But just because we like to do that as researchers doesn't mean that we're hired by people who love research. What they are really into is to solve their product problems. They want to solve their business problems. So we actually have an urgent need to communicate our insights, to communicate our priorities, to communicate our ways of working in a language and in a format and in a way that is easy to understand and is appealing. So that is primarily the reason why we need to obsess about the people we work with. We need to obsess about the language they use, and we need to obsess about optimizing how we communicate in writing so that we can get the buy-in that we need and collaborate closely with the product, engineering, design, what have you.
There are 2 keywords that I picked up, which were appealing and easy to understand in the way of communication. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so tell me if this is not right. Are these 2 areas where, in your opinion, UX researchers struggle a lot of times in putting their learnings and insights in a format which is engaging and at the same time understandable to people with various research experience and various knowledge about customers?
Mm-hmm. I hear your question, and indeed, we in UX research, I'll say something quite bold, but have a reputation problem. We care about rigor, we care about methodology, we care about, most of us, right, doing things right, but sometimes it can come at the cost of communicating in a language, in a format, in a way that might not work with the speed of our organization, with the needs of our organization. So there is some truth in how you're interpreting my words, but I will also say that I also work with engineers, I work with product managers as well, and many other disciplines as well struggle with this. And the reason why I obsess literally about the written communication as opposed to verbal communication, which also matters, is that written communication, friends, is very unforgiving. You know, when you are verbally exchanging comments, you describe something, you can hear people's reactions, you can check out usually their facial expressions, you can be interrupted with a question, you can clarify yourself. There is more room to iterate, explore, autocorrect. But when you're writing, the message goes out, it's out there, it has a life of its own. So you have to be more clear and coherent and intentional in your writing. It applies to many UX researchers, yes, but of course we're not alone. It's something that many tech professionals across disciplines need to improve.
Yeah, I can share a personal story here. I almost lost a co-founder on Slack because I thought I just asked a question, but it just happened to trigger like a very like I poked in a very sore point in his soul. So you, especially Slack, in my experience, it's very thin ice where even with the best intentions, you can easily be absolutely misunderstood.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you go to the core of why do we communicate in writing in the first place, that has to do with removing confusion, gaining clarity, gaining alignment, all those things. So we sometimes tend to think Slack is a great example from you. No, we're very quick. We can exchange messages, but if your message is creating more problems than it's solving, if it's creating more confusion than you had to begin with, then you have to ask yourself, was I intentional? Did it work out? Did I adjust my message to the culture of the person, to the role of the person? Is it what they need? Is it when they need it? So there's all these questions that might make us think like, am I going to be fast after all these considerations? But the truth is, yes, you're going to be more intentional. You might do less, but actually it's going to have more impact. So what a great example. And I hope it turned out well at the end.
It turned out well. All is good. Friendship and co-foundership saved because we went on a call.
Good, good, good. You didn't give up on each other. That's good.
Yeah. All right, Mel. Let's tackle this like topic from an angle, and let's start with, I'm going to call it self-assessment, because
Okay.
each of us are somewhat biased about ourselves and the way we see each other's selves, and we have blind spot. Um, is there sort of an approach or an objective way for any of us in the audience to easily understand whether we communicate clearly? Is it at the right frequency? Is it understandable? Does it trigger action? I'm just
Yeah.
pick the few dimensions. Maybe you have a few additional other ones to add.
Mm-hmm.
How should we go about understanding where our current weaknesses and strengths in communication of UX results?
I like it. No, we need to start from that assessment, and it's a learning process. It's a journey. One thing I do with my coaching clients, and it's also something that I recommend people that I partner up with, is to be very curious and passionate about getting feedback, right? And this could be people you work closely with. This could be people that you rarely work with. But these are the people that have those touch points with you, and you can check in with them in a timely manner and try to understand things from their perspective regarding your communication. Very importantly, because this is where I observed that things can get messy, Akosh. When we're searching for feedback, when we're seeking feedback on this, it's not that you're wrong, they're right, there's one right way to do this, but it's just, understanding that, hey, I, as Mel, I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, and a coach doesn't have it either. So it's just me collecting different angles, different pieces of information to try to get to a holistic view of things, right? So if you approach it from that perspective, it's less hurtful when you get redirecting feedback. It's more interesting to understand different people's perspectives. So feedback gathering is one thing I definitely recommend. Another thing that I really look for is looking inward. And this is about gaining more self-awareness. This is really about you being mindful, having stop signs and saying, okay, after I have such and such written communications, could be a presentation, a Slack message that is important, an email, what have you. How are people reacting? How am I feeling about what I wrote? What are the results am I getting? So it is like your perception meeting with the outside world. And another thing that I really like to say to people to make this process very exciting is to experiment. It's only when you experiment, you try out new things, you collect different results, you observe, you make meaning of them. The process gets really fun.
I love that. Let me pick on the second one. I'm going to call it a personal retrospective.
Okay. Yes.
Do you have like I don't know, how do you do you have a diary, or do you have like any way of I don't want to, like, you don't have to share if it's too personal what I'm asking, but like I'm just thinking, like, okay, self-reflection. I'd love to see how I'm able to overcome certain hurdles, inhibitions, and become better. And for that, for me, that is somehow intertwined with documenting my feelings and
I love it.
impressions. And this is why I said diary.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, Akash. Honestly, I'm an open book. If I weren't open to these sort of questions to be helpful, to be tangible, I wouldn't show up. I do love taking notes on my diary. I do have diary. I have shared diaries with my coaching clients as well. Part of what we work on is written communication, of course, amongst other things. So what we do is, for instance, referring to the written communication area, no, the topic of this today's conversation, we recognize our talents, our strengths, as well as our growth areas where we need to improve, where we need to level up. Once we identify certain patterns, and it could be, you know, such and such person, they have hard time with short and concise writing, they go in circles, they are long, it gets boring. It could be one area. The other area could be the order of the ideas they share. So we need to be specific. After getting feedback, after looking inwards, what are the patterns? What are the things that are difficult for us? And once we detect those patterns, it's really helpful to have them in writing. So for instance, in my personal case, in the areas where I'm growing, I do have an Excel as well. So that really helps me beyond that, you know, agenda, beyond that diary format, to sort of identify what am I doing each day, each week, whatever, on those areas. How am I evolving? How is the feedback I'm getting changing? What I'm experimenting with? It really helps to also see and say, okay, if this is important enough for me, for my leadership, for my growth, for my career progression, then I'm going to really try to track it. Not with judgment, like, oh, I failed again, or I'm having hard time with this, but rather, like, Coach, you know, with curiosity and non-judgmental awareness, so that you're genuinely curious as to how these things are evolving.
You on these things, like we only measure, like we have to define dimensions, or maybe I'm too scientific here, but what I'm thinking is that if I want to track my progress, I need to measure things, or at least have attention. Like, are my messages too long? Am I rambling too much? Is it to the point? So maybe structure, maybe cleanliness, legibility of the. What are some key dimensions that you track and that you recommend the audience for tracking when they self-reflect on their own communication skills?
Okay, perfect. So let me also reference my sources. I would like to be just as scientific and academic on that. What I focus on is something from writing hacks from Professor Rosenberg. She's from Harvard's writing tutorial. And this is something that I studied a lot, both during my time at Harvard when I was doing some training there, as well as during my years in tech, where I've asked myself questions around how those principles apply to writing in tech. Because we're not going to write a novel, we're not going to write a PhD dissertation. We need to improve our written communication so that it fits our service. So with all that said and done, there is indeed a few principles that I want to share here. We need to, take them with a grain of salt, adjust it to our context, our personality, our own challenges. But the point number one, to make that clarity, is about cutting the crap. I would like to say it that way, because it's really about removing all the filler words and keeping it short and nice and ensuring clarity and precision. So instead of trying to say this one thing in a long sentence with 5 similar words and adjectives, say it shorter, say it clear, trim all the fat, basically. That's what I'm going to say. It matters a lot because, especially, most researchers here in this call, I understand that you work in tech. Speed is extremely important. And one way for you to help your team gain speed is to remove the confusion, help make decisions faster. And you can get to do that better with a clear communication without any facts. So that's one thing that I really care about. The other thing is I tend to work with international teams. So I lived many years in the US and the Netherlands and a bunch of other places. My team is also very international, the language of origin, where they are from and all that. So I've noticed that when this happens, there is languages where people don't tend to use active words. Spanish is an example, Portuguese is an example, Italian is an example. So it's like you say something where you read it and like people don't understand who did it, who said what. It's like lack of active verbs, making it very hard for you to understand who's responsible for what. It creates ambiguity, it creates confusion. There is this long and passive sentence. So those are the things where, hey, if we know that tech moves fast, we need to understand who's responsible, who needs to give feedback, who needs to execute. Just having, sentence structure where we clearly understand in each case, like who's doing what, who's responsible. That's another thing that I really care about. The third thing, coach and friends, is about using plain English. There's times where you talk to an engineer, you talk to a designer, you talk to a product manager. It's like they have their own language, right? They're using technical terms. It's very long.
The abbreviations.
Exactly. It's like, I don't understand. So your whole point is, you said you have a 5-year-old, no, Akash? So it's like, can my child understand this? My sophistication as a professional, as a researcher, doesn't come from how sophisticatedly I can speak. It's rather how much I can simplify, sharing the essence of what I do. So no acronyms, don't use jargons, only what is necessary. Just make sure that your work is accessible to people outside of your team as well as the new joiners. That was the third one. So we mentioned cutting the crap, using the active words, and going for plain English. The fourth one I care so much about, and I have great passion for, is about ordering our ideas. Because what usually happens in written communication is that the order with which your ideas come to you, they occur to you, and you write, isn't necessarily the same order that people can make sense of your writing. So once you get your first draft out, if it's an important presentation that, for instance, goes to the C-level, if it's an important Slack message that, like in your case, maybe announce to the whole product team and can generate confusion, or if it's an important all hands presentation, whatever it is, if it's an important thing, you got to put it out and you got to ask yourself, okay, now that it's out, I have the big picture here. Like, what are the ways I can order my ideas so that it is appealing, it's not boring, it's clear, people will understand if I will ask them to take an action, or if I'm just informing them what the topic is, what's important. So the order actually matters a lot. That was the fourth one. And almost the final one that I really care about, that I think people can trace the origins and track the progress. I suffered a lot from it myself. I still do. Is about saying things once. So the human tendency, especially in writing too, is that when we care about something and we are feeling a little anxious, that like people can forget about it, they might not understand it. So we keep on saying the same thing over and over and over. I'm guilty of it. So I'm not here to tell people like, hey, don't do that, because I do that myself. It might be okay when you're talking, it creates a vibe, but when you are writing, you have different versions of saying the same thing. Please stick with the best version and remove the rest, because it's pivotal that your written communication is short, it's easy to consume, it's clear to understand, and it's against your best interest that you repeat the same thing over and over. So cutting what you don't need, just as I said at the beginning, is super important. There's a couple other things, Akash, that I already indirectly said. Obsessing about who's going to read this, understanding their language, understanding their priorities and whatnot is important. I already talked about the first draft. I already talked about the importance of looking back at it and ordering your ideas. So rewriting is part of the process. So with those things, I think we have a very clear idea of what important bits are out there to trace.
Absolutely. And just ordering the ideas also reminded me of what I do with my notes on research calls. And typically when I take notes, before sharing raw notes, I reorder points, and I also do. And this is something that I wanted to ask. What's your take on bullet points? What's your take on leaving an empty line after 2 sentences, or just in terms of what do you think is efficient in terms of visually easily readable? So it's not like a block. If you're writing a longer message, it's not a block of text that people tune out from after the first 3 sentences.
I had a reaction, Akash. I just smiled and laughed, if you notice, because I'm known amongst my friends as well, not just colleagues, but friends, as the bullet point girl. I love bullet points. I live on them. Maybe I'm on the extreme edge, but hey, I like that they're actionable. I like that they're simple. I like that they make each point clear. They're harder to miss. So I also noticed that, just as in Lenny's newsletter, other places where, those people are greatest references in tech world. Like bullet points, whenever especially you are highlighting the key insights, key learnings, those sort of things is very helpful, because the alternative to that is, like you're saying, no, the long messages, long chunks of paragraphs and whatever, and your messages can be lost, they can be fall through the cracks. So short bullet point list is amazing. But of course, everything I said in these 25 minutes and I'm about to say in the second half, take it with a grain of salt, understand your audience, understand the context in which you're writing. So if you are gonna deliver a very tough message to your direct report or someone in your team or anything like that, of course you might not wanna use bullet points. Of course, you want to be a little more intentional about the tone and the message there. So it depends, of course, like many things we like to say in research, but bullet point, I think overall is a good approach.
Yeah, it's for all these like approaches and let's call them principles about the language that you use, using an active language. Do you have some how do you remind yourself of these principles as you're writing? Because life happens, right? And it's not that we're walking around and we have a little card saying, okay, these are the five, okay, I need to be, oh, it's not active. But so it somehow, it has to, from knowing the principles, there's a journey to creating a habit in how you write. And I'm wondering, what's your recommendation for exercises, anything that helps to create habits?
All right. I'm a person of habits. I'm inclined to think that you might be as well, because we are raising two young children. We have a very challenging, rigorous job. So you need to tap into habits if you don't want to be always actively thinking and getting yourself tired. I'll give an example from how I prepare my kids before we go to school every morning, because that's not too far from how I work with my coaching clients or how I work myself. I have indeed at the entrance of our place a very quick posted checklist, so that I don't leave my kids without their water bottle, without their babero, we call it in Spanish, like whatever they need to wear when they're eating, this and that and a couple other things. Doesn't mean that I'm really obsessed, like pulling it out and looking at it every time. No, because there is that habit formed. But whenever I'm multitasking, I want to make sure it's there. So looking back at the whole thing with the written communication, indeed, especially at the beginning, if you're in your journey early on, being more intentional with your writing, it doesn't really hurt to have a checklist. Doesn't mean that you keep staring at it every time you write, but once you write it, you're improving it. Look at your checklist. Like, have I trim the fat? Am I repeating the same point over and over? Am I intentional about the order of my writing? Am I using active verbs? Like, it doesn't hurt to bring into your attention all those questions you can ask yourself to improve those points. And eventually it becomes a point where you don't have to ask so much, because it just becomes automatic. So you need to put less effort into that. But until you get there, it might be actually wise to have it somewhere as a physical list. That's
yeah. Thank you. And just our chat reminded me that I sometimes use an app. It's called the Hemingway.
Oh yeah.
Or the Hemingway editor, and it gives you a grade. Like, you copy in any piece of text,
yes.
And it gives you a grade of how complex are your sentences. Like, which grade of education does somebody need to have to understand what you're writing? And for instance, for me, it's something I like to use just to check if the language is too complex. I'm just going to put the link in the chat as well.
I love it. Yes, I love Hemingway, the person, actual writer. I love his writing. I love his journalistic style. What a great example. The app is great as well, but I will still be a little bit annoying on this, right? I think there is a value in not over relying on apps like that, and creating that internal process in you so that you can find ways to improve your written communication. Imagine a terrible day when the app is down. There's a bug, you can't use it. What does it mean? Are you going to delay your presentation date for that? So I'm not against technology. I'm not against AI use or anything like that. But I think, let's think for ourselves a little bit as well.
Yeah. It's 9:30. So, and I see a lot of question, a lot of engagement. I'm just gonna put like Adriana's comment straight away up here. She says that Gen Z apparently finds bullet points aggressive. It you know what? I find capital letters aggressive. It's so interesting. You know, when you get a subject line with all caps, that's
Yeah.
aggressive. It's so interesting how it's changing.
Yeah, interesting reflection, Adriana. I would love to know the reference, the source on this. It will be good to have it. I do teach at a local university, La Salle digital business program, and almost all my students are Gen Z. What a great encounter. I'm a millennial, right? So there is major changes. I think written communication works very differently for younger generations, because back when I was growing up, we didn't have smartphones really. We didn't have the messaging experience the same way that we have today. The whole thing, I think, transformed. There's a possibility. But hey, you know, I'm going to go back to my earlier point to also gain consistency. If you are writing mainly for the Gen Z audience, and you know from those very people, because there's also variety amongst the Gen Z, we need to understand, you know, their location, their native language, their income level, their education level. There's a bunch of other things within Gen Z that creates diversity. But at any rate, if you believe that you gained enough knowledge and experience that these people find bullet points aggressive, then don't do it. This is, I guess, as simple. Question of adapting to your audience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just go back to a few questions from Jean, for instance. Issues being concise in communication. If you could expand a little bit on conciseness and how you cut you, I think you said cut the fat or
Yes.
something along the
I
cut
was
the
like,
fat, something along those
the
lines.
friends we have here could like tell me the accurate way to say it, but yeah, trim the fat. I think that's a little bit of what. So I don't know the best way to pronounce it. Sounds like a German last name, Jan. This person, what a great question. I can speak from a perspective of someone that who also struggles with this or struggled in the past with this. So I have a great empathy, appreciation for this. How can I work on that? Be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself. That's the first point, because I've learned from my experience as well as experience of my coaching clients too, is that part of the reason why we have hard time being concise in our written communication is also lack of confidence, anxiety, a little bit of lack of trust that we have on ourselves and our communication. Because once we establish that, we trust that with one short sentence, it can work. So I think part of it is that inner work, looking inwards, trying to see, okay, what is it that I want to achieve? I might work on different ways to say it. And once that I sort of figure out the best way, let's keep it short. The more you say it, the more you're going to confuse people, get convinced. That's one thing. And the other part that I don't think I mentioned enough, well, sort of Hemingway conversation touched upon it, but it's very valuable, Jean, to find some role models, people that inspire you with their writing. So I'm very grateful to be married actually to an amazing systems engineer, a release manager. And his writing also a lot of the times goes to the executive team, goes to the engineering directors. And it's an amazing piece of very short writing where every single word is absolutely necessary. There is not even a single thing that is wasted. And this level of resourcefulness over and over becomes something that if you're exposed to it, if that's what you consume, that's also what you're going to give out. So see if you can consume any sort of concise communication to the degree that you naturalize it and you also start to share that. That's, I think, one thing that could work.
I love this. One example from a different field I can add to this is when you have a startup and you apply to Y Combinator, one of their first questions is to explain what your business does in 50 characters. Now, when you have 50 characters, it's like 5, 6 words. You have to choose them very carefully, very, very careful to describe the essence of your business. But it's a really good exercise, I think, and it doesn't have to be your startup. It could be your role in a company, and it's a good exercise to try to like trim all the words, all the filler words there. We have Arabi. Sorry, Ariba. Ariba wrote a question. It's I let you read through it, Mel.
Okay. I'll
If,
say for people, if there is anyone with
just
physical
listening. Yeah.
impairment or anything like that, the problem I face with communicating with certain stakeholders is that I have not been in their place, in their roles or teams, so I'm very unsure of what language they are more comfortable with. I work at a design agency, so I don't usually work with the stakeholders regularly. How do I figure out what kind of language they respond to with limited interaction? This is a very smart question, Ariba, because indeed you read my mind. I would say observe, see how they communicate. Mirroring is a very valuable practice. You mirror the communication style of the person in front of you so that they can digest better. They're familiar with it. People like what they're familiar with. But if you don't have that luxury, it's just sort of more of a transactional one-time thing. The best, most efficient, optimized way to go is to genuinely go ahead and ask them. You might have many talents as a researcher or someone working in a design agency, but I trust that you don't have mind reading capabilities. So one way to go ahead is to ask in a very simple, actionable, humble way by showing the intentions. And this is part of creating alignment, creating consistency, setting expectations, defining together what success looks like. Even when you work in-house, it's healthy to understand, hey, like what kind of frequency of communication do you deserve? Do you like Slack better? Do you like email better? Do you think that it's better to work through Jira comments and tickets? Understand the format, understand, experiment a little bit, ask for their feedback. So if you show the true intent of, hey, I want to be efficient, I want to deliver value fast, meaningfully, effectively. So this is why I'm asking you, can you tell me a little bit about your communication preferences in writing? I think people will also appreciate like, hey, this person really wants to deliver value for me. And that could work.
Yeah, I like the fact that you also mentioned the channel. I approach this from a sales perspective, but people do differ, and some people respond to emails, others respond to WhatsApp messages, and I could send them 5 follow-up emails and would never get a single answer.
Right.
When I send a WhatsApp, I get an answer in 2 minutes, and there's anyhow, Sarah gave you a question about remote environments. And what do you do if you don't get frequent feedback and have limited interaction with your colleagues?
Mm-hmm. It's an important one, Sarah, because my observation, I work with remote teams as well. Over there, the importance of written communication is even more important because you don't have the luxury to balance what happens with written communication, with the body language, time spent together in the office, and that sort of thing. So it becomes even more important. There are companies that are fully remote out there that have policy or recommendation or things like that for written communication. It is worth to check what resources out there too to see what are the things that could apply. But over there, one thing I've learned, and maybe this is something we can put Akash on the comments and tag it as well. There is this book called The Culture Map, and the author is Erin Meyer. And this really talks about, for the remote teams, international teams, how written communication be considered, be improved. But the whole TLDR, the insight over there is, if you have that concern of remote teams spread worldwide, especially, is try to be simple. Don't assume that there is enough shared context. And this will have implications, for instance, not using that many acronyms, not assuming that people know what you're working on, how you're working on. Use short, simple sentence, have an open dialogue with these people and see what they know and what they're interested in knowing and that sort of thing. So it's a simplifying, making things short and easy, plain English, that sort of thing will be your great friend.
Yeah, thank you. We have a couple of questions from Peter. One thing is about adapting academic writing to business and UX writing. And the second one, a little bit going in the direction of Hemingway app, using AI to improve your writing. Maybe just, throwing in your text in ChatGPT and ask it to tidy it up. What are your thoughts on these?
Nice. So I went to graduate school. Actually, I told you earlier about my experience in the Netherlands. So I'm familiar with academic writing. And if my 4-year-old was to ask, like, what's the major difference between that and writing for a product team, for a business team within UX, is like, hey, you got to be very result oriented. You got to be very impact oriented. So the main tendency in academic writing is sort of like seeking knowledge for its own sake because we enjoy it and it's beautiful and it's relevant. We need some people to keep on doing that. But when you write for tech as a UX research professional, you need to really make sure that you're pointing out at every opportunity, like, this is how we're going to change the results that we have. And these changes in the results, this is going to, give such and such business value. So every detail you share, whether it's a recommendation or an insight or an observation or what have you, that you make it very clear that this serves to a purpose of like the certain success metrics, certain KPI, certain OKR, or whatever that is, basically. That, I think, is the major difference of like the pragmatic approach in the business writing. The second part, Akosh, I think there were 2 questions in there. Was about using AI, right? I'll be very transparent, people. I do use it every day, right? Because I told you, you use your critical thinking skills and all that, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. I'm a non-native English speaker, although this is the language I use the most every day, all days of my life. I still feel like, oh, what about a pronunciation? What about a preposition? What about maybe spelling error? Like, I'm human, right? I'm always multitasking. So I think the prompts you use matter a lot. If you just were to use an AI tool to improve your writing, because you're not feeding the tool in like what would be a good way to make that improvement, you need to be very specific. So for a lot of times that I'm using a tool, it could be Grammarly, it could be ChatGPT or whatever else, I'm very clear that I want to fix the grammar mistakes, right? I want to keep the sentence short, plain English. I want to also maintain the original tone. And a lot of the times in my ChatGPT discussions, I already fed a lot of my writing so that the tool can understand how I'm supposed to sound to be authentically me, so that the results I get don't sound like anything you have online. So that would be one way, for instance, for you to use it.
Yeah, that's a really good one with the ChatGPT. I can share my 2 cents on this as well. For instance, I'm always worried that ChatGPT just replaces a word that I'm very passionate about. That is Akash and me. So what I do is I always ask ChatGPT, is this proper English? Write the text. And then I ask ChatGPT to highlight any changes that it does to my text. And then below the text, it writes me, it's change text, blah, blah, blah. But I can quick read that and just have the comfort that it hasn't changed like an important. Yeah.
I also have
I acknowledge my own limitations, and I may be over controlling this one.
No, it's beautiful. I also had some back and forth with the AI tools that I'm like, no, you don't understand. Please. I even said, please, like, please. Can you be more authentic to the original version? I just need you to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it happens. We're human.
So let's go to a very different area. Solony is asking, how do you, like, let's say this is your first day as a UX researcher in a company. You're brand new, fresh into the profession.
Oh, that's the kind of question. Okay.
At least, so tell us if I interpreted the question the wrong way, but this is the way I understood. You're fresh, you're new. How do you get started? How do you know what's good and what's bad? Because you don't have like a starting point.
That's right. Akosh, I honestly didn't interpret it that way. I honestly thought that this person.
Oh, I leave you to interpret it then.
Because I hear you say this is actually like a UX researcher who had a previous job as a UX researcher, and they're new in a company and they need to, get buy-in, build work relationships, that sort of thing. Whereas my interpretation was like, these this is a person who has never done UX research before. They had a different job title, and now they want to start as a UX researcher. I guess the answer is a bit different, no?
Yeah. Let's go with your interpretation.
It's
your call, and tell us if
totally not working out for you. Like, feel free to let us know. My greatest secret of success with my UX career coaching clients as well, whether they are career transitioners or they are senior level, some of them are already directors, is reverse engineering. I'm very passionate about subjects because, for instance, this case from Solenino, how do you get started as a UX researcher? I have inclination to say that before you start as a UX researcher, you've done some things. Maybe you've done market research, maybe you've done data engineering, maybe you were in marketing. There were some things you were doing. Even if you were a student that weren't technically working full-time, you've done some things, you gained some results. So look in front of you to see what kind of work you've done, what results you obtained based on your proactivity, skill set, knowledge, experimentation, whatever, and see what parallels you can draw with what you've done technically outside of UX research that could actually be very relevant to UX research. And that'll be one way, no matter how junior you might or might not be, you can use to leverage your positioning to be already competitive. And of course, together with that, there's obvious thing that many people will tell you, which is to identify your areas of growth. For instance, if your ambition, your goal, your desire is to be a mixed method UX researcher, you have some experience in interviews, but you haven't done many surveys or anything like that, it's clear that you need to take some courses or maybe learn with some tutorials or experiment with things. Like, obviously figure out what it is that you need to level up, but don't just focus on what's missing. Also focus on creating synergies between what you have done and you're good at, and then that could be valuable for your future UX career. That's great. Solene is saying, I'm a cancer researcher at the moment. Amazing. So figuring out what results you obtained, what success, what accomplishments you gained, Sol, and everyone else here within your field that is technically not UX research, that could be valuable for UX research.
Yes, thank you. I see a number of other questions in the chat, so there's an important call to make, Mel. If you have a few more minutes, there's like 3-4 questions that I'd love to cover. Okay, amazing. Thanks so much. And also for the audience, hang around. There's a lot of pieces of wisdom awaiting us on the way in the next 5 minutes. Oriana is asking about communication with senior leadership, and how do you navigate in that space?
I love it. Luckily at Glovo, in my last year, I started to work directly with the C-level every day, every week, every meeting, a lot of it. And I've learned a lot from that. One basic thing that everyone, I think, in this meeting can apply straight away is that no matter what company you work for, there's usually the tendency to make a reports, presentation, whatnot, in a very soft format. Let's say, like, first you do the intro of your research insights, you talk about your methodology, and then insight 1, recommendation 1, insight 2, recommendation 2, that sort of thing. And indeed, executives don't have the patience, neither interest for that. So one way to find out is like start full speed, get to the essence, get to the meat. I like to call it, like, again, trim the fat, go to what's really relevant and pull it up. If they're interested in the methodology, if they're interested in your intro, if they're interested in more studies that are linked as your secondary research that you've done prior to your work, you can put it on the appendix, extra notes, or whatever they can find out. The other thing that is extremely important is that these people don't have time for learning for its own sake. They're busy with reaching the OKRs. They're busy with gaining, the business objectives and whatnot. So if you can tie closely what you've done, the results you obtained, the knowledge you gathered with the goal that the company has, a problem that they're working on solving, that's hugely important, because then, you'll attract their attention. Example, if user churn is a major problem, we haven't solved it, we have running to sort of figure out how that's going to work. So whatever insights you gather, if it's linked to that, you mentioned that, and you mentioned from what angle it's going to be relevant. And so they're actually going to end up listening something that they think about all day and all night. And this is one way to work with them, I think.
Yeah, what you shared reminded me of my early days in my professional life. After university, I went to strategy consultancy, and I had an amazing partner and superior. He became my mentor, and one of the things he told me over and over again in the first months is when I got a task, I had to do a research on a particular market, and he asked me, "Okay, so where did you get?" I started describing him all the things I did, and he said, like, Akos, I'm really uninterested in your process. I'm interested in the results. Okay, give me the results. You can explain to me the process afterwards.
Yes.
So this, but I don't know if it's education or something, but I like always describe it. Oh, these are all of the things that I did, and I found it very important. He didn't, so I just have to flip it around, just as you recommended.
Exactly. That's also my learning. I think the biggest wake up call for many UX researchers, I woke up just not so long ago. I wish somebody had told me 10, 15 years ago. But like, we researchers love research. We love the process. We love to get our hands dirty. We love to discuss it. We love to think, okay, what are the implications? What could be the next project? Whatnot. But people who hire us, they don't hire us because they love research. They hire us because they need to solve problems. So if you finally understand that, this is going to have an impact on your communication. You're going to be a lot more results oriented. You're going to be a lot more impact oriented. I think that's the level of, impact orientation we need to get.
Yeah. Let's jump to the question of Pallavi about balancing between being concise and not sharing some data. What's your take on this?
I love the question, Pallavi, and I think I have a sense of where you're coming from, because being concise, I know people, unfortunately, that I work with, that they describe themselves as I'm being concise, but truly they created silos. They were asked to be elaborative on, open questions where we needed details. They didn't offer those details, and they were feeling like, okay, the communication, the time I spent on communicating is the time wasted for me doing the actual work. What I'm describing is absolutely far from that. What I'm willing to describe here is for you to assess, prior to your written communication, what level of detail is relevant for that specific individual in this specific moment, in that specific context. So if you're in a situation where we need that detail, indeed, give that detail. Of course, this is fundamental, but the how of giving the detail, the order of your ideas is also relevant. So if you give me 5 pages of a detail after a detail because you're afraid of data being lost, maybe I read them, but just like what Akos described earlier, maybe I'll be like, what are you telling me? What do you want me to do with this information? What is the key message I want to understand here? So make sure that you're mindful of what level of detail is needed. And if a high level of detail is needed, be intentional about how to order it so we're not lost in, a large number of details before we get to the actual point.
Yeah. I have a next question from Sarah, which is about, it's a different angle here, about UX researchers being described as negative Nellies. I love the phrase that Sarah's using here. What's your recommendation to her?
Yeah, I think I also, for the longest time, was a negative Nelly as well. I think it's also part of the academic research culture and environment. We give critiques to each other in a way that we are willing to identify the gap that is missing. We expand on it, and this is how we provide value. And I understand that. In my opinion, and I'm willing to hear what Akos you have to say on this as well, we need to give opportunities for the product teammates, engineering, design, whatnot, for them to understand what are the changes we can implement for reducing churn, increasing growth, improving retention, what have you, like whatever that is. So we need to focus on that negative, but I think framing is important because this is bad, this is not working. If you come up with an actionable way to sort of help with recommendations, help moving forward, align, get buy-in from engineering, from design, so that the solutions you are recommending is actually something that the technology allows to execute. It can be prioritized, that sort of thing. So basically, if you're pointing a problem, but you're also showing in ways that it can be solved together, of course, is a group effort, I think that has a better chance to be perceived as positively. And make no mistake, our job is to point out to our teams, with usability testing, discovery sessions with new users or whatever else, we need to tell them what is missing or what can be wrong or what opportunities can be lost. So this is our job, but we need to frame it in ways that our stakeholders perceive it not as a threat or not as a negativity for its own sake, but as actually an opportunity for growth, and prioritizing in a way that this is not all bad. No, there is, I think, some excitement that we need to also share to create good vibes as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you said reminded me. I think there's also some cultural aspects here. My first thought was if you go in like a municipality in Hungary, I'm Hungarian, and you walk in there and you want to like accomplish something, then typically the first answer is it can't be done.
No.
And like no, it can't be done. And of course, there's always a solution in the end. And it's just a matter of I keep like asking myself, why is it the first thing that they tell me that it can be done when it's done in the end? And I think with the best intentions, like a lot of times, when somebody comes with like a non-trivial question, or somebody comes with a question that sounds stupid to me, it's easy to like instantaneously downplay that. And my technique in this case is to ask. Like instead of like even like somebody tells me something, why do you want this, Richard? What do you want to accomplish? And typically when you dig a level deeper, there's like an empathy that you can build with your audience, and there you will always find something that you can do for them that has some like a grain of positive news and messages.
I love it. I think you brought me to the final point I wanted to make on this. It's very special that you mentioned it as well, Akosh, because sometimes we forget, and I want this message to come very clear to everyone here, is that we are human beings working in a team with other human beings. They might be product managers, designers, engineers, what have you. So it is very human, friends, that a product manager invested in their hypothesis. So of course they are a bit puzzled, they're hurt when the hypothesis is not validated. Or a design professional, you're a designer in the team. Of course they're a bit hurt when in usability testing, the designs created confusion, lack of interest, what have you. So understand that we researchers are in this unique space where we're insiders and outsiders. We haven't designed it. We haven't built the product. We're not that invested in that particular solution, but other people might be interested because they were the ones that actually physically built it. So, engineers suffer from the same thing. Like you talk about their code, they're like, oh my God, like this is personal. It's like my poetry. So it's a bit hard. It's a bit harsh to know that something you've done didn't work. So also being mindful of, what points to prioritize, what degree of intensity, what long list of things to share, to understand that you deal with human beings, and maybe you need to adjust and fine tune like how you say things. I think that's also part of the story.
Absolutely. I see. I'm gonna pick a next question, and I'm sorry for anyone. Like I promise anyone who hasn't had a chance to get an answer, I'm gonna share those remaining questions, and I'm gonna make sure that we pick somehow Mel's mind, and you can learn from her. I'm Isabella. Let's pick Isabella. She's asking about if you have any tips on communicating during usability tests, the most valuable insights. So not just at the end of a test, but already during your research study.
But I'm a bit confused with regards to how to communicate during usability tests with the research participant, right? And then an entire different things when you communicate the insights with your team. Is that what you understand, of course? What do you understand?
I know. I think I understood.
Okay.
Okay. So my initial take, and is Isabella correct us if oh, she's saying yes.
Said
She's
yes.
saying yes to you. So it's
Because I first
it's
thought
2-0 for Mel now interpreting questions. I'm
let
gonna
me
stop interpreting for my guests, and this was the last time. I tell you.
okay, it's okay. Isabella, you caught us off guard. This is the communication with the user. Gotcha. Truly, you want to be open-minded. I mean, you gotta be very open and not too narrow with your users. We have a lot of tendency to go very specific, almost feed with our users with very specific information, very specific sort of almost biased questions in that. And so one way, granted I haven't done for years usability tests myself because I was managing team of researchers prior to transitioning to coaching, but what I remember that worked very well from usability tests and how you communicate with users is that remove all the bias from the order of your questions, from the way that you're asking questions. Create silence moments so that you're not talking all the time. You let the person talk, you let the person struggle. Usability test is one of those places where less is more in your communication, because you want the person to be in the moment, make their mistakes, have their struggles, and you at most you follow up and you're like, what do you mean by that? I noticed you done this. Can you tell me what you intended? Think out loud. That sort of communication is very helpful. If that is your intention, Isabella, in asking this.
Mel, thanks so much. We went way over time. I really appreciate the energy from the audience, all the amazing questions from very different aspects of communication and UX research. So I'm going to wrap up the session now. Thanks to the audience. You've been amazing. I love the energy, and I hope to in 2 weeks I'm going to have my next session about how you say no to high priority requests from your CEO, and my guest will be the ex-VP product and design of Hopin, one-time unicorn during Corona times. So join me there, have a chat. In the meantime, make sure you connect with Mel. She's on LinkedIn. She's active. She also has an amazing Substack that you may want to follow. Check it out from there, and also check out Airtime. Take it for a spin. Have a look at how it can help you analyze research calls that you do with your customers. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, good night to everyone. And Mel, I'd love to have you again. And there's just so much I'd love to unpack in the future. So expect me to knock on your virtual door to join me for another chat sometime.
My virtual door is open to you, Akosh. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, everyone.